He screamed, "I want a divorce," and walked out the front door. And I was relieved. Hi, my name is Kacie Bryant, and I'm very simply going to tell you my God story. So to start, we have to go all the way back to 2001, where I met my husband, Doug. We met at a wedding. He was a groomsman, I was a bridesmaid, and we walked down the aisle together. It was so precious. And it really does happen, just not in movies. And 4 months later, we were engaged. And a year later, we were married. And for a while, life was good. We moved into a cute house. We had our first child, and we were doing well. And it was about the 6-year mark when the crap hit the fan in our marriage. I was very pregnant with our second child, and very unexpectedly, we found out we had to move out of our house. And our only option was to move in with my parents. Nothing says happily ever after like moving in with mom and dad. So we moved in, and soon after I gave birth to our second child, and about my 6-week checkup with the doctor, she asked me, "How are you doing?" And my response was, "I'm fine." And Doug said, "No." And I just started crying, and I couldn't stop. And the doctor diagnosed me with postpartum depression and gave me a prescription for Prozac. Not only was I living with my parents, now I felt like a complete failure because the one thing that I thought I should be able to be good at was raise my children. I can't even do that. So we did the most logical thing you can think of to try to bring me out of this slump and kind of save our marriage because our marriage started getting kind of bad at that point in time. We made a huge financial decision and bought a house that we couldn't afford. So thinking that that was going to be great, it actually ended up being bad for us, and it drove us further and further apart. And that's the point where Doug said to me, "I want a divorce," and he walked out the door. And I really was relieved that he said that because in my mind, I get to start over. The kids and I can pack up and we can get out of the house. But that's where my story kind of took a turn that I wasn't expecting because clearly Doug and I didn't get a divorce. And at that point in time, I was working full-time, and one of my coworkers knew that something was going on in my marriage, but didn't know exactly what. But she always mentioned Crossroads Church. In every single conversation we had, "Kacie, Crossroads this, the Crossroads that." It was really kind of annoying, but apparently it worked because I decided, okay, fine, I'll just go. Because what do I have to lose to go? I mean, I believe there is a God, but I didn't necessarily believe he was for me. So the kids and I packed up one day, and we went to Crossroads. And my very first service was a baptism service. Oh my goodness, I was not prepared for it. And I sat down in those seats, and I were watching people come out of the water with tears of joy, pumping their fists. And I was so sad because I wanted to be like that, and I couldn't understand how to get there. Yes, physically, I could walk up on stage and I could get baptized, but emotionally, I wasn't there. So I just continued to come because I just wanted to understand, how do I get to that point? How do I feel that joy? And I did that for 6 months with the kids and I until one morning, Doug said, "I'm coming to church with you." And I was like, "Great." And I said to him, "Why? You're an atheist. Why would you want to come to church?" And he said, "I want to make sure you're not part of some cult." He really did say that. So off we went to church, and I looked at him in the car and I said, "Keep your mouth shut and your opinions to yourself until we walk out that door." And in one service, his life completely changed, and he went from being an atheist to dedicating his life to Christ and getting baptized very quickly. Yes, you should be happy for him. You should be happy for him. I, however, was pissed because I had been coming for 6 months, God, seriously, 6 months, and in one day he gets it? What about me? So I did the next logical thing you should do. I just continued to think, if I just earn God's love, maybe that will help. So for years upon years, that's what I did. So Doug and I, we joined a journey group with a bunch of strangers, and they ended up being some of our lifelong friends. We joined a marriage class, and then we ended up teaching the marriage class. I started volunteering in First Impressions and holding doors. I went on a go trip. I just kept doing thing after thing. And the closer I got God. And the closer I got to Doug, the more and more I felt like a fraud. Because what Doug didn't know is when our marriage was just horrible and when we were just barely existing, I had an affair. And I was able to suppress it for a very long time. But the closer I got to God, the more I thought about the affair. Until one day, Doug came home and he said, "Honey, I've been praying," which is really weird because we didn't really pray, but he said, "I've been praying." And God said, "You need to quit your job." And I knew what God was saying to me. God was saying, it's time to deal with the affair, and the place where you're working is not a healthy environment to do it in. So I listened to him, and I went to work the next day, and I quit my job. And for a year and a half, I got down on my knees every night, and I said, "God, please forgive me. I am so sorry." And I would hear, "I forgive you, Kacie, but you have to tell Doug." No, I can't do it. The shame and the guilt were so heavy that I could no longer go to bed at the same time as Doug. I would wait till he would go to sleep first, and then I would go to bed. And one night in April 2013, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm laying in bed, and I hear, "Now's the time. Now's the time. I can't do this, God. Now's the time." And it was physically making me ill. I was getting up, throwing up, and coming back to bed. Now's the time. And then I did the one thing you should never do with God. I bargained with him. I said, "God, if Doug wakes up, I will tell him." And as soon as that came out of my mouth, I heard, "Honey, what's wrong?" "I'm sorry. I had an affair." And he looked at me and he said, "It's okay. I forgive you." "What? What do you mean you forgive me?" And he grabbed me by the shoulders and he said, "No matter what you do, I will always run after you." And for the first time in our marriage, Doug prayed for us. And he said, "God, thank you for my wife. She is a gift to me. And if I forgive her and you forgive her, no one has any right to judge her. Please take away any shame or guilt she feels because they are not from you." It is the closest I've ever been to being in the presence of Jesus, and I got it. I couldn't earn my way to God's heart. I couldn't earn my way to God's love. It was given to me freely if I was willing to take it. People always ask Doug when we tell our story, "How are you able to forgive her so easily?" And he'll always refer us back to the verse, Colossians 3:12-13. It says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you." And Doug will say, if God was able to forgive me for all the crap that I've done in my life, and I've done way worse things than Kacie, what right do I have to hold anything against her? And that night, God gave us one more gift. The night that I confess is the night that we conceived our third child. Her name is Faith. And we named her Faith for a very specific reason, because she was conceived in the utmost faith in Doug and in God. Thank you very much.